Welcome everyone to our Communications for Leadership workshop with Stanford lecturer and author of Communicate with Mastery, JD Schramm. I'm Cheryl, the VP of Events here at YEI. Next, one of our event coordinators, Alyssa, will go over some norms for today's workshop.
Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to stay muted during the presentation when Dr. Schramm is speaking and to stay engaged. Please keep your questions until the end, as we will have time for a Q&A afterward. Next, Ian, our COO and president, will introduce YEI.
Again, welcome to this amazing workshop. We're excited to have our speaker here today. So just information about what the Youth Economics Initiative is for all of you who aren't members. YEI is the world's largest coalition of high school economics clubs. We're a student-run 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering youth entrepreneurs and economists with pathways toward careers in finance, economics, and business. Whether you're looking to start an economics club or already have one at your high school, through the YEI, starting and maintaining an econ club is easy. Outside of our public events and webinars like this one, we offer a wide-ranging set of resources and opportunities exclusively available to our chapters. From our two flagship competitions, Econ Bowl and Econ Olympiad, which gives students a chance to demonstrate their knowledge and win cash prizes of up to a couple of $1,000, to our 40+ weeks worth of economics and financial literacy curriculum, to even our multiple initiatives that provide members with service and research opportunities. Starting a chapter with the YEI opens a door to a broad-ranging portfolio of amazing activities just like this one. Over the past year, we've impacted the lives of over 1,200 students, distributed $1,500 in prizes, and established chapters all across the nation and abroad. But we're just getting started. If you're interested in starting an econ club at your school with the YEI or bring your pre-existing club on board, check out our website at theyei.org and fill out our registration form. Our expansion team will reach out and get you started as soon as possible. If you have any questions about joining the YEI, please email expansion@theyei.org. We can't wait to welcome you to the YEI family.
Thank you, Ian. Next, Dr. Schramm will present, then there will be a Q&A after. You guys can send questions to Dia during or after the presentation, or raise your hand during our Q&A at the end, and we will unmute you to ask your question. About Dr. Schramm, he's a lecturer in organizational behavior at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. He joined their faculty in 2007. Before that, he was part of Columbia University and NYU's faculty. In 2012, he co-founded the Low Keynote program for students to create and deliver inspiring talks to enroll others in their vision to change lives, organizations, and the world. In 2019, he was also appointed the inaugural director of the King Global Leadership Program for Stanford's Knight Hennessy Scholars. Then this February, he published his first book, Communicate with Mastery, Speak with Conviction, and Write for Impact. Please welcome Dr. Schramm.
Cheryl, thank you so much for that introduction, and Ian for the background on YEI. I have done some research into YEI as I was accepting the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. And I am both impressed with your mission, but also really taken with the time commitment that you all put into this in your individual clubs and chapters. And so excited to be with you for a bit today. You know, my green screen is being funky here. I think you're gonna probably get frustrated at that. So let me just adjust my background here. Okay, now it looks like I'm teaching from a tent, but at least it won't be flickering in and out the way it was. And our time is limited today, so I want to be sure that we get right into it. We'll be together about 45 minutes-ish, where I've got some content for you from the classes I teach at Stanford. And so let me get into that. A couple of ways about how I operate as a teacher. First of all, I would love to be more interactive than Zoom allows us to be. I will take questions at the end, and if there's something that's just burning, connect with Cheryl, and Cheryl, you can interrupt me if you know there's something I need to answer right away. Do know that you will get a copy of all of the slides, and as well as a couple of other resources that I think are useful to you in the work that you're doing in YEI. And I sent those to Cheryl before the session began and asked her, don't send them out during the session, but send them out afterwards. And so know that you will be able to get those. And with that, let me go ahead and begin. Just be sure we've got, there, I know how to do it. Okay, you're all seeing the leadership communication and the Golden Gate Bridge, correct? Okay, good. Here's the 4 things that I want to accomplish in less than an hour. First of all, I want to talk about what I mean when I say leadership communication. I want to give you 2 frameworks. One is the AIM framework, which I so wish I would have invented. And the second one is the Crucial Conversations framework from the book by the same title. And then I want to be sure that you get some resources so that you can keep building your leadership communication as you move forward. And what's not listed there is take some time to answer your questions. So very easily, leadership is looking behind yourself and seeing if anyone's following. And quite often when I'm brought into a company to work with a senior leader, they'll say it's a communication issue, but actually it's a leadership issue. Or they'll say it's a leadership issue, and when I get in there, I realize it's actually a communication issue. For me, communication is leadership and leadership is communication. If in your chapter, let me just pause for a second. Cheryl, am I using the right word, chapter, or do you call them something else?
Yeah, we call them chapters.
Okay, so if in your chapter something isn't happening effectively, what many leaders will do is start pointing and figuring out whose fault that it's not happening. But when I point one finger out, I've got 3 fingers coming back at myself. The first place I need to look is, am I communicating effectively that I'm making it easy for people to follow me? Even something as simple as filling out a Google Doc or responding to a doodle about when we're going to have a meeting, I want to communicate in a way that makes it easy as possible for people to do the action that I'm asking them to take. Now, we did talk briefly about my book, and I do have to acknowledge I am really proud of this puppy. And certainly available on fine bookstores everywhere. But I'm going to give you some tips out of it, and I'm also going to send you access to my website where there's a lot of resources. You don't even have to go buy the book, but feel free if you want to. But the title of the book is Communicate with Mastery, and there's a very specific reason I chose that term. Now, you're all economics aficionados, and you're all in high school, so this may be more familiar to you than it is with a lot of the leaders I work with. But reminding people what an asymptote is. That's where you have a curve that's getting closer and closer and closer to the line, but never crossing over it. That image is what I like to look at in terms of mastery. Mastery is where you want to get better and better and better at something, but you know you're never going to perfect it. There's no such thing as a perfect call or a perfect email or a perfect meeting or a perfect class, because even the very best classes, the very best meetings, the very best documents can always be a little bit better. And that's what we mean by the concept of mastery. Getting better and better at something that matters, knowing that you're never going to be able to achieve perfection. Now, I took this definition from Daniel Pink in his book Drive, where he talks about there's 3 things that are going to motivate people to want to work for you, or in your case, volunteer for you. Autonomy, having the desire to direct their own actions. Mastery, meaning they're going to get better and better at something. And purpose, that what you're doing is a part of something bigger than just yourself. Now, I think his book is a remarkable book about what motivates people to do something. But the one that I want you to cue into today is that concept of mastery, getting a little bit better every time you do something. Somebody mentioned skateboarding earlier, or playing classical music. All of those sorts of skills are something that we just keep getting better and better at the more we practice them. Now, the first framework I want to give to you about being a leader who communicates effectively is the AIM framework. Who is my audience? What is my intent? And then and only then, what is my message? The first place you always want to begin is who is my audience? You want to get to know them. I mean, we did a little bit of that before the session, just finding out where people were dialing in from. I did more of that with Cheryl and with Dev in the prep calls that we did and the emails that we sent back and forth. But you want to get to know an audience before you write or speak to them. In the professional world, you might look at somebody's LinkedIn profile. In your community, it might be looking at somebody's Instagram feed or Snapchat, or looking at what their digital footprint looks like. It may also be talking to other people to get to know, what's going to inspire that teacher to take on one more extracurricular opportunity, or advise us on this contest, or travel with us for this trip. The more you know about your audience, the more successful you can be when you communicate with them. Second is intent. Now, I use interchangeably intent, purpose, goal, objective. It essentially just means, as a result of this communication, what do you want them to do? As a result of this email, what's the action you want them to take? As a result of this conversation, what's the item you want them to do for you? Knowing who my audience is and what it is that I'm asking of them has to happen before I get to message. What happens with too many leaders of my generation is they communicate the message they want to share without thinking through what is it that people need to hear or want to hear. Now, be careful how you listen to this. This is not you manipulate the message for each audience that you want to speak to, but you know how to emphasize the elements of the message that are important for that person to know. Take, for example, all of you are in school, or you're in summer right now, but when schools communicated to all of you what the reaction would be based on the country you live in, or the principality, or the county, or the city, what was going to be expected inside of COVID-19. Now, their message had to be the same to everyone, but they might position it differently to the parents than they do to the students, than they do to the teachers, than they do to the staff, because each of those audiences is going to be listening for a different element of the communication. So that's what we mean by knowing audience and intent before you get to message. Then when you get to message, you want to think about both what's the channel you're going to use, as well as what's the structure that you're going to use. Now, again, going back to the chat function, I would love for you just to write down and pop in the chat, what are some of the channels you use to communicate? You might make a phone call, you might send a text. What else might you do to get messages out to members of your chapter or external groups that you might interact with? Using Slack, great. Discord, I'm not as familiar with. Using social media, we're using Zoom constantly now. Facebook, I have a 21-year-old son that my husband and I adopted when he was 16. The only time he uses Facebook is when he wants to be sure that his dad see the message. WhatsApp, FaceTime, MySpace. Sharon, I am really impressed, or you're being very funny, but there are very few people who even know what MySpace is. Tinder, okay, that's a completely different workshop, completely different audience and intent. Not going to go there on that one. But knowing what's the channel that I'm going to use to communicate something to someone. And I do this based on the audience. If I'm going to communicate with a group of high school students, I'm going to use a different set of channels than I am going to be to reach their parents. And so being thoughtful about that, and then communicating the message in a way that makes it easy for that person to take the action you want them to take. I'm going to call out Dev for a moment here. When he first reached out to me with his email, it was so clear. I knew exactly what he was asking. I didn't have any questions other than, when can we meet to talk about this? That's not my experience. I got a lot of messages from students at Stanford, grad students at Stanford. I have to read them 2 or 3 times to figure out what they want. His first email was so clear, I knew that it was something that I wanted to be a part of. So let me pause there for a moment and see. In fact, I'm actually going to stop sharing for just a moment. Are there any questions about audience intent and message before I go on to the crucial conversations framework? You can either post them in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask. Going once, going twice. Okay, let me go back to my slides. So I used to teach high school teachers how to teach effectively, and in high school, you're supposed to wait 4 to 7 seconds after you pose a question before you go on to the next thing. In Zoom, I think you have to add like another 5 seconds to that, because people have to find the unmute. They got to do whatever they want to do. Oh wait, there is one question that came up. What if your audience is comprised of many different types of people? Awesome question, Adi. When you do audience analysis, you want to be thoughtful about who the decisions makers are, thoughtful about what the general makeup of the audience is. But if it is a very mixed crowd, you've got young people and old people, you have people of different cultures, people of different political persuasions, you want to think about communicating in a way that the middle 60 to 80% will get the message. And there may be some people that it's a little too over their head, maybe some people it's a little too basic for them, but you want to shoot for what the middle of the road is. You also want to be thoughtful if there is a dominant culture that you need to communicate within. So for example, if I was doing this workshop in Shanghai, I don't speak either Mandarin or Cantonese, so I would have to be speaking through a translator, but I want to use examples and language and illustrations that are appropriate for that audience versus what I might use here in Silicon Valley. Gian asks, what if you don't know how to categorize someone? How would you figure out what platform is most appropriate? This sounds really basic. Just ask them. I started a new job a year ago with the former president of Stanford, and in the first few weeks, I was like, how do you want me to communicate to you? And he's like, I'm on Slack, but I so much prefer email. I said, great, now I know. And so sometimes I would send the same information to him on email that I'd send to my team on Slack, but let your audience tell you what they prefer. If they can't tell you directly, ask somebody who knows that audience well. Let's say you're trying to open up a new chapter at a different high school than the one that you attend. Your high school may be very focused on Slack, and that may be what most students use, but you need to find some students in the new school as kind of a focus group and have them tell you what they would prefer. And for a very complex message, you might have to use 3, 4, 5, 6 different vehicles to get them. As you watch the elections that are going on right now, both candidates at the national level and also at the state level and local level, they will use, an ad, a postcard, a phone call, a town hall meeting. They'll use a lot of different vehicles to get their message across because of the stakes of the message. So now let's move to the second framework, which is from a book that I will be sure it's actually not in the reference materials I already sent you, Cheryl, but it's called Crucial Conversations, and the primary author is Patterson, although there are 4 authors on it. And in this book, they define, before I go there, I want to acknowledge we're going to be talking about conversations where there's some tension involved. Now, some people, and this can be cultural as well as just personality driven, Some people hate tension and they don't want to have conflict and they don't want to have any sort of tension in anything that's going on in YEI. But tension actually can be a valuable element. Think of a drum or a tennis racket or a bicycle wheel. If there isn't tension, you wouldn't be able to hold on to that circle. So just because there's tension in a leadership meeting or in a regional meeting doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You want to look at how you can manage that tension and manage that tension effectively. Now, in the work that I have done over the years, I think the simplest model to look at this is the model from the book Crucial Conversations. So when you need to have a crucial conversation, that's where three things are present. First of all, there's opposing opinions and strong emotions, and the stakes of the decision are reasonably high. If you only have one or two of those things, it may be a tough conversation and there may be some tension, but it doesn't actually fit the model of crucial conversations. For example, I've been in meetings before where people are discussing, the color of linoleum in the break room. I'm like, I really don't care. I want to make sure there's a microwave and a refrigerator. I don't care what color the floor is. And so I don't have an opinion. The stakes aren't particularly high to me. But for other people, that may be crucial. And so, but you're going to look inside of your organization, inside of your chapter. When do you see these three elements there? Opposing opinions, strong emotions, and high stakes. In the book, they say, whenever you're not getting the results you're looking for, it's likely that a crucial conversation is keeping you stuck. Whether it's a problem with quality or time or satisfaction or just a personal strain in the relationship, if you can't talk honestly, you can't expect poor results. I am so used to teaching this model to people in their 30s or 40s or like myself in their 50s. How awesome if in your teens you could actually begin to identify and work with this model. You could short circuit a lot of the problems my generation has created that we're leaning on you to figure out a way to solve. So here's the basic premise of a crucial conversation. You want to imagine in the center, that blue circle, that's like a pool of shared meaning. Now think of like one of those backyard pools that you might have had when you were a kid. Maybe it's just a foot or two deep and maybe 3 feet or 4 feet wide. The wider that pool could be and the deeper that pool could be, the more room there is for you and your friends to get into it. And so if I had a 10-foot wide pool and a 3-foot deep pool, there would be more room for more people in there. And you want to think of that plastic pool as an image that when you're having a disagreement with somebody, the first place to go is to figure out what you've got in common. Figure out where that pool of shared meaning is. And the wider you can make it and the deeper you can make it, the more room there is to figuratively get in there and work out a solution with the other person. Now, two things can get in the way of this, and they're listed at the top and the bottom of the diagram, and that is silence or violence. Now, I hope in your YEI meetings you don't come to blows with people and actually have physical violence, but there can be emotional violence where somebody screams or yells or uses inflammatory language against somebody else. Or almost as destructive is the member who just shuts down. Fine, I don't know, whatever you want to do, I don't care, it's fine. No, I don't have an opinion, go ahead, it's fine, do what you want to. Either withdrawing or attacking get in the way of that pool of shared meaning. So when you see somebody either lunging forward or withdrawing, you want to stop, call a pause and say, okay, let's see what we all have in common here. Now, for the sake of this illustration, we're just going to imagine two people in this conflict. What you want to do is get the other person to share what they see, what they hear, if they can tell a story about how this decision is going to affect them, if they can talk about what it is that they're feeling, and if they can have any source of action, suggested action that you could come to that would resolve this problem. And you want to invite the other person to do this in a way that you also can share your feelings and tell your story and suggest your action. And it's not necessarily one for one. Sometimes it looks like that. Sometimes I let the other person go all the way through their 4 pieces. And I might just ask questions like, well, tell me more about that. Or, wow, I can see this really, this upsets you. Has this happened before in the chapter? Is there other places that this is showing up? The more that you get them to open up and speak, and they may come up with an action that is not at all something that you're in favor of, but you want to be able to let them get that out there. And then to be able to say, so I see things differently. Can I share what my story has been and what I see as a possible action? And usually if you've given them time to share theirs, when you share yours, they will respectfully, engage, hopefully the same way that you did. You kind of want to model that respect for one another. And then get to the place where you're looking at 2 different actions and you measure what action is going to be to the greatest benefit of the pool of shared meaning. I loved the masthead on your website. YEI is dedicated to educating youth about economics and believes that education is the key to bettering the lives of tomorrow's leaders. That's a part of the pool of shared meaning you already have. As you're debating about, which day you're going to do an event or what venue you're going to use or who's going to host something, you might have to go back to something like that and say, well, what's going to educate the most people? Or what is going to give us the best chance of bettering the lives of our members? And there are probably other documents and other parts of the YEI experience that become a part of that pool of shared meaning. In its ideal state, both people would share their feelings, suggest an action, and then negotiate an action or figure out a way that, I don't think we can make this decision today. Can we circle back on this Friday? Or, I don't think either, we can't do both of these. We have to do one or the other. Let's figure out a way to decide, a time by which we're going to decide. But sometimes, and that's the coolest part of leadership communication, sometimes the 2 suggestions can lead to something else that neither one of you would have considered. If I know what's important to you and you know what's important to me, there may be a solution that you can come up with that nobody would have thought of. I use the example of from the musical Hamilton, which I hope many of you have seen, especially now that it's on Disney Plus. Everybody should be able to see it. But the whole idea of negotiating whether the capital of the United States was in New York City or in Virginia, and where would the banks be headquartered? And they were able to both say what was important to them. And the banks, as we know, ended up on Wall Street, and the capital ended up on Pennsylvania Avenue. But that whole idea of sharing what's important to you and hearing what's important to the other person. Okay. Oh, great shape on time. I want to pause for a moment there. I'm actually going to leave this up this time because I may need to come back to that. But let me pause there. There's one question that came in that I'll answer from the first part. And then if there's any questions on this model, as you kind of grapple with how to use this in your work in YEI, I'll be glad to answer those. Recommend resources for how to maximize communication with a diverse audience. If I want to communicate effectively with 60 to 80, what are some of the resources I can use to learn how to do that? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Atharv? I will have a resource list in a couple of slides here that will include some books, and I will come back and indicate which of those I think would be best on this particular question. Are there any questions on either the Crucial Conversations model or anything else that you want to pose in terms of leadership communication? Looking at Neha's question, well, the first part of the answer is, if somebody's not willing to compromise or work with you, it depends. It depends on the stakes of the issue that's at hand there. Depends on the power differential between you and the other person. I was in a work situation once where I thought I was negotiating a package, but the supervisor had no interest in negotiating. It was what he was offered was all that was being offered, and I tried this and I tried that, and I was like, nope, this is the package. And because he had the authority and he had the purse strings, I had to accept what he offered. It depends on what your commitment level to that idea is as to whether to try to compromise or bend. The best option is if you can get to that collaboration where each person, it's not I give up a little bit and you give up a little bit, but we actually create a new solution together. But if someone's not willing to do that, I have to decide, do I want that partnership, or do I want to walk away from that if they're not willing to negotiate at all? It's a really, you went right to the heart of the challenge of crucial conversations. Jean asks, if the interests are directly conflicting and you can't find a compromise, continue deliberation or let the person go from your team? Well, yet again, it depends. There may be ways that if you've got time in the decision that you could say, let's circle back on this Friday. Again, you want to make the pool of shared meaning as big as possible. I see lots of stuff we agree on. We agree on this, we agree on this, we agree on this. That's a good starting point. Let's come back and look at this again. Once we both had some time to think of it, let's see if we can come up with any new solutions. If it is a volunteer, say in YEI, and you're trying to decide if you can move forward with this person as a part of your committee or part of your team, I think you do have to decide, is this going to be valuable to have the dissenting opinion? And can that person move forward even though we've made a decision in a different direction? Or if their interests are so conflicting, is it best for the organization that one or the other leave? And I think those, when to stay and continue voicing a minority opinion, and when to leave are tough calls, and they really challenge our character as we try to make those decisions. And sometimes the best thing to do is to find some place that your contributions are honored, and sometimes it is good to stay in an organization. Tricks and tips on negotiating. Yes, I will have to send this to you. There is a great TEDx talk on negotiation by my friend Maggie Neal, and I think her textbook is a little too dry, but her TED talk is really good about how to approach negotiation. So I'll send that out. Cheryl, I'll send that to you and you can send it on. How should we react if they back out of it? Teaching a rambunctious child. Let me go back to Neha's question for a second. Yeah, if you've got the capacity that you can walk away, and this actually plays into the question about negotiation, the most important thing in a negotiation is to be willing to walk away, to let that car go, or let that house go, or let that job go. If you can't back out of a situation, what you can almost always do is hit the pause button. I do that with my own kids. In addition to my 21-year-old, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And there are times that, yeah, I still have to make a decision. I still have to be the parent, but I can hit pause for a few minutes and I can say, you know what, daddy's upset right now. Let me come back and look at this. Or with the youngest one, I can put him in his crib, although he's about able to get out of that. And I say, you're in the penalty box for a little while here. But hopefully in most of your chapter relationships, you've got that commitment to personal relationship and personal connection that can be the underpinning, so that when things get rough, for example, with me and my husband, there will be times we disagree and we see things differently, but we've got that pool of shared meaning that we're in this together. And so you may be able to build that relationship with people that allows you to have differing opinions, but still come to a resolution. It's a long journey. It's an ongoing journey, but it's one I definitely believe is necessary for leaders to be effective. So we are about 5:40 right now. I want to, at this point, Cheryl, talk through the resources that I'm sending out, as well as the resources that I recommend people find. And then I'll let you kind of guide us to the next piece of what happens after I go through this. So first of all, resources, if you still use books, I have a few books to recommend. Before I get there, I run 2 YouTube libraries for Stanford. One, Low Keynotes, is a library of individual TED Talks, TED-like talks. I've got about 200 of those up there. And I've also got another collection that's called GSP Communication Lessons that are 10 to 15 minute long team presentations. Both of these would be great examples of good communicators, but also some really remarkable content. So I encourage you to check out those 2 YouTube libraries. There's over 200 of the individual talks and about 50 of the team presentations. And the team presentations has everything from, there's one up there on crucial conversations. There's one up there on interviewing effectively, using Zoom effectively, overcoming anxiety, using visual aids. In terms of print books that I would recommend, we've talked enough about my book. Love to have you check it out. If you are involved in pitching ideas to get other people to fund them, The Startup Pitch by Chris Lipp is awesome. If you struggle at all with anxiety, my friend Matt Abrahams wrote a book, Speaking Up Without Freaking Out. Great title, simple little $10 book, really good strategies for dealing with anxiety. And then just general public speaking, and this goes back to the question about audience analysis, how to get to that 60 to 80% of the audience. The best book I've seen out there is Kara Alter's book, The Credibility Code. In addition to her book, she's also got a 1-hour Google Talk that is a free access to get the core concepts of her book, but really good about how to communicate effectively with an audience. And then some of the scenarios that the staff and I will be looking at later talk about how to give and receive feedback. And I think the best book on feedback is Kim Scott's Radical Candor. And so those would be the books I encourage you to check out. I saw a few of you snap screenshots or photos of that, and that'll also be sent out to you by email. And then I'm happy to continue being a resource to you. And those are the easiest ways to reach me. I should actually take Twitter off of there because I tweet about like 50 times a year, and about 40 of those are, well, TEDs going on. So, but easy to reach me on LinkedIn or by my email at Stanford. Cheryl, do you want to talk through the next piece of where we go from here?
Yeah, Dia, do you want
to? Yes. So we're actually going to give an opportunity for a formal Q&A session between the participants and you. So again, my name is Dia Jane. So if you have any questions, you can either put it in the general chat or message them to me specifically. I know we have a question by Atharva. Did you want me to read it out loud?
Yeah, I'm just seeing that now. I missed that earlier. And I think everybody can see it. So let me just read to the heart of it. Wow. Atharva, that's a challenging situation. You know, there's at my quick read of it, there's two things that are going on there. First of all, there's what's right to do, and there's what's legally binding. And many times the two of those are directly aligned. And in some cases, what they can do legally, it was a non-binding contract, and they were not being held to that because they were under the age of 18. So that's what's legal, but maybe not necessarily what's right in that situation. It's difficult after somebody chooses to leave the organization to influence them to keep their word. And so I think it is worth an appeal to that pool of shared meaning, that sense of shared purpose and commitments that we made to each other. But probably, one pitch, maybe two. I think at some point you have to, unfortunately, cut your losses and be able to move on. And so, from what you're describing there, they went back on their word. You want to do all that you can on your side of the street to not go back on your word, but to, be able to let go and step forward. I don't want to be political here, but I do love the Michelle Obama quote, which I think can guide all of us in both political perspectives. When the other person goes low, you want to go high. And so your own reputation, your own integrity, that's something you can't get back. And so maybe a pitch, maybe a second pitch, and then ultimately find somebody who'll do the artwork that will live up to their word. That's a tough one, and it's actually generated several discussions there. Integrity, trust, and second chances are important, but how many chances should you give a person or a group to correct their mistakes? There's no silver bullet answer to that one, Shion. I think that as leaders, we deserve to have people deliver on their word or correct themselves. Integrity isn't always doing everything right, but cleaning things up when we make a mistake is also a sign of integrity. And so if you're dealing with somebody who has made an honest mistake, that is trying to correct it, that's trying to do better, I think it is good to, renegotiate or reset the boundaries and say, okay, for next week's newsletter, I need to be sure that it's done by this time and it's been proofed by this person before it ever goes out. If it is a pattern of continual disappointment from another person, then I think you have to have the tough conversation about, is this working out for them and is this working out for you? Where you can share your side of the story and they can share theirs. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I have been so impressed with people who've stepped up when I've given them that second chance. And there does come a time where a third chance or a fourth chance just isn't in their best interest, and certainly isn't in the organization's best interest. Okay, I'm down to Alexander's. Alexander, I think it depends on your relationship to the 12 kids. If you had a leadership role, then I think you might have to intervene. But my gosh, if you could let them solve it themselves and not intervene until necessary, till it's been escalated, I think that is a better course of action. And also, let me go back on this one, Alexander. Go back to the audience intent and message. When you think of that audience, you think of those 12 kids, you really want to define for yourself what your relationship to that group is. And so if it's an ongoing relationship that you know you're going to see them regularly, there may be some questions of role modeling, mentoring, items that this particular fight about what flavor of ice cream we got on that particular day is not the big deal, but the way in which we manage communication moving forward is. And so there may be a longer term relationship that's more important. But I think often if you cannot introduce yourself into somebody else's conflict, that's better. And then just you're able to be a third party to it, a Switzerland, if you will. When we're sending emails to adults, how do we want to appear professional? Well, actually, before I go to Selena's question, Alexander, did I get yours answered? Because I see your follow-up. In what way? Alexander, do you, I don't know if you can unmute. Is he able to unmute and we could just talk?
Yeah, I think you did answer my question.
Okay.
The like fight was over like insults actually. It involved like all 12 kids.
Got it. Yeah, I'm still stuck on camping trip with 12 kids. I mean, for me, a camping trip is a hotel that is, a Super 8 or a Motel 6. That's as far as I go camping. So good for you. Let me go to Selena's question. When you're sending emails to adults, how do you appear professional? First of all, Dev or Cheryl, I think it'd be fine if Dev shared his email, his original email to me, because I think it's a really good example. 3 simple watchwords: active, brief, and clear. You want to be active in asking for, making clear a request that you're making. This isn't a grammar class, but I prefer you avoid the passive voice and use the active voice. We are seeking, we would like, could you do? So make it active, make it brief, especially with so many people reading emails on phones these days. If I have to scroll to a second screen or a third screen, and I don't have a relationship with you, I may not do it. Or what happens in my world is I'll click the chevron so it drops to the bottom part of my inbox. And someday when I'm on hold with AT&T, I'll then get to answering your email. So you want to make it as short as possible, but then it comes to the C, clear. You want to be sure that it's clear what you're asking for, how they can get back to you. It takes more time to write a short email and a clear email. But that's what I would focus on. I don't believe you need, hope this finds you well, hope you're enjoying your summer. If I've got a personal relationship, I may say, how was the trip to Mississippi last summer? It sounded like a good opportunity. Or how did camp go when you took the 12 kids with you? But if you don't have that relationship already, I think you're better off creating the relationship, not by an artificial level of connectedness, but by just saying, I've looked at your work online. I really would like to talk to you about X, Y, or Z. Great. Yes, I agree, Daya, with where we're at time-wise. That makes sense to me. And so let me go to, I'm actually gonna quickly try to get both Adi and Gion's question in. Adi, what is my definition of success? My definition of success is making a difference for people, that they're able to do something better or different because of my interaction. Whether it's coaching my son on which cell phone plan he's going to buy from AT&T, or working with a student on how to write or speak more effectively. My definition of success is, have I been able to help somebody do something better? For me, it's not about money. And reputation is important, but reputation is often what other people think of me. And it's, I think, more important that we think solidly of ourselves in that regard. Gion, getting too busy, simply procrastinate. How can I hold myself accountable and get more organized? And this will be the last question. Part of what I would offer, Gion, is, first of all, be thoughtful about how many commitments you have. There may be some stuff that you need to step away from or let go of so that you can focus more and do better on the commitments that you have. But absent that, because I don't know enough to make that advice, what I would urge is that you get really good about setting deadlines, communicating deadlines, and having people hold you accountable to deadlines. For example, I love doing workshops like this. I am really bad about following up afterwards and sending out my slides and my notes and my promises that I make inside of the talk, like Maggie Neal's TEDx talk. And so I will tell people, you will have this by the end of the day tomorrow. And if you don't, please ping me, because I want to get this done quickly for you. And so if you make promises and then ask the people you made the promise to hold you accountable, that can be one of the best ways. And if you find you've got so many promises out there you can't keep up with them, then you may need to look at what commitments you can keep. Wow, these questions were remarkable. The depth to which all of you went with the questions in the discussion board, really impressive. I liked that conversation, and I will turn things back over to the YEI leaders.
That concludes the public session of our workshop with Stanford lecturer JD Schramm. We hope you find these new lessons and skills helpful and apply them throughout your leadership journey. All the slides and resources you mentioned will be sent out by email, so make sure that you filled out the registration form for this event to receive the email. If you're interested in more events, next week the YI will be hosting a speaker series. Every day, there will be a different speaker discussing the economics of current issues, such as COVID and sustainability. Interested in attending? Check out our Instagram for more information. And always, by joining the YEI, you have access to more and exclusive events like these. Thank you all for attending. Make sure you fill out our feedback form at bit.ly/leadership feedback.